you all very much, and a special thanks to the EPA for inviting me to speak at today's conference. As outlined, I'm Senior Executive Officer with responsibility for Ennis Municipal District, and I was hoping to talk to you today about some of the challenges in undertaking public realm projects in very congested streetscapes and how to incorporate nature-based solutions into those. So I suppose I'm going to do a little bit of PR on Ennis. Come to Ennis, it's a great town. We are the largest town in Munster. It's a medieval townscape, so it's very narrow streetscapes, a lot of old buildings. We're an architectural conservation area, the entire town centre is. We're adjacent to a special area of conservation, which is the River Fergus. And I suppose some things we're extremely proud of. We won the Tidy Towns competition last year, and we were a finalist in the Friendliest Town. So that'll be the next conference we hope the EPA will organise in Ennis. So I suppose, realistically, we were very fortunate. The public realm in Ennis was, I suppose, degrading over a number of years. There was issues. It wasn't very pedestrian friendly, very dominated by vehicular access. There was issues with surface water and ponding in those areas and odours. So we were really, really fortunate when the URDF came about, and we found the opportunity to try and enhance our public realm. So I suppose primarily one of the main reasons for doing public realm enhancements is to boost economic activity. We did have some of our principal shopping streets that were underperforming with high levels of vacancy. So there was an urgent need for intervention in the area, and primarily how you do that is to improve footfall. And coming back to that, it's about improving accessibility and increasing dwell time. So there was a number of things in terms of accessibility. We didn't meet minimum footpath width requirements under deemers. We had very little cycle infrastructure, so that was one of the things we wanted to look at. We wanted to reduce the amount of clutter. And we also then wanted to introduce greening. Given the old historic nature of the town centre, there was very little greening in the area. There wasn't any seating. So we wanted to look at age-friendly seating, and we wanted to create focal points in the town centre. I'm not going to ask you to read all that. That's the map of the overall town centre of Ennis, and the two areas highlighted are two. We were fortunate enough to get two URDF-funded projects. So challenges, obviously being an ACA is extremely limiting. There's a lot of compliance requirements in terms of what you do in an ACA. I've highlighted the fact we had major issues with accessibility on the street that couldn't be overcome with the street width as was. So there were points in the street whereby you couldn't get 1.8 metre footpath and retain a carriageway in the existing format, and that could not be retrofitted. So I suppose what that led us to was to incorporate shared surface throughout the town centre. So what that is that pedestrians, cyclists and cars have equal priority on the road. So you have no curbs anymore, you have no lines. So I suppose some of you may be aware of that through the new shared surface signage in Deemers. Extremely congested underground services. It was if you thought above ground was bad, below ground was worse. Issues with levels and falls, traffic management, was obviously something that had to be managed. And as it's a functioning town, you still have to cater for it to enable trade to happen. So given all of those problems, why would you incorporate SUDs? So I suppose, look, I'm probably speaking to the converted here in the audience. SUDs is a way of managing rainfall that minimises the negative impacts on quality and quality of runoff while maximising the benefits of amenity and biodiversity for people in the environment. I read that out because I would be afraid I get the quote wrong. So I suppose the primary reason for incorporating SUDs is looking at issues such as, reducing the requirements on your drainage network. Amenity is a very big thing in an urban area to ensure that you have attractive multi-use spaces. Having the quality impacts of having some of your pollutants filtered out, and in terms of effluent runoff from roads. And obviously biodiversity is a major thing. What you do want to do is to encourage, whether it be bees or insects, and to create corridors within your urban environment that connect up to other greening areas. So there's a lot of rationale for including SUDs as opposed to traditional planters. This is for those people are very interested in incorporating it. I suppose some of the things you do have to consider in that is what is the right location, and this is always going to be very site-specific. So where you want to go is where your rain is falling to, primarily, and that needs to be evaluated. So realistically for us, the right location was where there was space. We took 1.8 metre from the building line on both sides of the road and drew a line and figured out what space we had left. And then as part of our public realm works, we would have been doing GDPR surveys and slit trenches. And what we decided to do as a priority for ourselves was where there was space, we were going to incorporate nature-based solutions. And as a result, within our project, we will have 5 rain gardens incorporated in Ennis. So a little bit in terms of composition, these are all things that need to be factored in. You need to have the right composition of freeboard, topsoil and subbase, and freeboard is where your water is stored. And it needs to allow for rainwater to flow into it and for silt accumulation. Your topsoil is going to generally be the mix of sand and compost and, forget the last component, and obviously your subbase. So the depth and size, there's no one size fits all for the engineers out here, of which I'm not one. There's a number of calculations that you can do to work out how much you'll actually be taking off in terms of surface water. And obviously the bigger the better, but that's not necessarily true in an urban environment where you don't have space. And so I suppose it is the cumulative effect of having a ribbon of rain gardens as opposed to large scale ones which may, you obviously don't have the space in an urban area. So obviously there's things to be considered like infiltration, which is the flow of water through the rain garden, and how you deal with overflows. And those overflows, and that would be in stormwater events or heavy rainfall. And obviously the advantage in an urban centre is you can use your existing gully system. And when you're retrofitting a public realm, obviously you can locate any new gullies either downstream of a rain garden or within a rain garden. Planting selection is really, really important for a number of reasons. Different plants actually have different benefits. I've listed out a couple of them here, but really what you want to do is have a variety. But in an urban area, it's really important in terms of considering as well the location, how often they bloom, whether they meet your biodiversity objectives, how seasonal they are. So there's a lot of ask, but traditionally I suppose what local authorities have tended to do is do the same job but in planters, which obviously have no environmental benefit. I'm showing you these drawings just to show you, I suppose, I'm sure you probably can't read them. This is 2 segments of this project. And I suppose what I wanted to show you is in certain locations we've put planters, and in certain locations we've put rain gardens. Some of it's down to space, some of it's down to underground services, but what we've tried to do in this is use greening to define the road line in a shared space. So what we didn't want to do was introduce bollards or introduce lines. But we're very conscious of driver behaviour, which sees a big open space and thinks it's all theirs. So what we wanted to do was use softer solutions to define what would be the road line in a shared surface from a public safety perspective. So you'll see we've especially used rain gardens at turning radii and in some of the junctions to try to mitigate the requirement for any bollards. That's a typical composition in our scheme, but as we have 5, there is 5 different compositions, 5 different types of rain gardens. And I suppose this is what I'm going to finish up with. It's the imagery of a refined streetscape. So I suppose on the left you have the current situation. So you have really, I suppose, a streetscape that needs a bit of refreshment. You'll see the various elements here in terms of, we have done a lot of work in terms of underground services. Irish Water were very good, came in and have upgraded the water mains and their sewers. We've had contact with various utilities around upgrading their services and providing extra ducting. And obviously we're putting in age-friendly seating and various different elements. So I suppose your public realm has a lot of work to do to meet a lot of needs for a lot of different people. And it's really important that anything that you put into your public realm has as much multifunctionality as possible. And in terms of putting in nature-based solutions, it really is a way of dealing with some of the negative effects of rain fall-off from your road network, as opposed to the traditional planter units. And I suppose it is an opportunity for local authorities to consider in capital projects about incorporating these measures, because realistically, incorporation of rain garden when you're doing a major public realm upgrade is actually no more costly, because if you're putting in paving in the same area, you actually are still doing the excavation, you still have to put in the concrete sub-base, you then have to put the paving on top. And I suppose the maintenance thereon in terms of weeding and pruning and, all the other things that gardeners do, they would be done in a planter anyway. So, you can get all these benefits if you incorporate these systems as part of your design process. And it's a huge opportunity with URDF funding or RDF funding, active travel funding, to really meaningfully look at incorporating rain gardens where possible, or other different types of nature-based solutions. And I do have to say that, I have found LAPRO to be a great resource. They have a lot of information on their website. I suppose they have had a number of conferences recorded. So I'd encourage anybody to have a look at that for any advice they might need. And that will be me. Oh, I forgot the last picture. So we're changing, obviously this is another image of another part, moving from removing parking, incorporating greening, and putting in shared surface. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much.